We're excited to welcome back to the show the author, coach, podcast host, JP Nerbun. JP, thanks for joining us again.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity to be back with you guys. On my first appearance, I got, a bunch of texts and emails saying, "Hey man, you're on this podcast. Just heard you there. That's big time." So I hadn't heard of the podcast before, but since then I've been following you guys. So I appreciate your work.
Oh, wow. That means a
Someone's
lot.
listening.
We feel like we made the big time getting you on. So pretty cool to have you on a second time, and excited to celebrate what you've done. You've written a third book, but your most recent book, The Sports Parent Solution. And I was thinking before we dive in, because it feels like you are very prolific. I feel like we just talked to you about the culture system. I know it came out in 2022. And then all of a sudden I hear from you like, yeah, I got a new book out. I was like, what? I feel like you just wrote that book, and writing books are hard. So I was just curious, like what maybe some of your habits are, some of your routines, like how are you able to stay on task and accomplish something like this by writing another book so quickly?
Yeah. Oh man, I love that question. So yeah, I'm really into my discipline. Like that's a core value of mine. Is discipline. So the probably the most transformational or impactful habit that I have built is that I time block my day, even my weekends a little bit, which kind of annoys my wife, but we work through that. But essentially I'll sit down. I'm not religious about it doing it every evening. Sometimes it might be the first thing in the morning, just because with three small kids, life gets crazy. But I find that time to sit down and say, hey, what am I going to do? And there's some things that are on repeat. And I actually use, like, in my phone, I use the reminders app that also syncs with my MacBook. Other people like to write out, but I like to be flexible and I can drag and drop stuff. But yeah, I've got my, time block. I'll every morning, my power on, which is meditation, journaling, prayer, those types of things. I got my workout, and then I look at my calendar and I make sure those meetings are in place. And then I go to all my other to-do lists. I have this, like, I use the reminders app, and I have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday built out, and then next week, this week, each month. And I got a few other to-do lists, but I'm constantly dropping things in place. And I used to be this guy with like 3 pages of to-do lists, like I'd write, and looking at to-do list used to make me overwhelmed. But I'm able to really structure my day so that I'm efficient. I don't get distracted. I'm fully present in the work that I'm doing. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I do, is just in structuring my days, is the time blocking. I've got a few other things as well too, but that's the biggest one.
It sounds like you're you're really organized and thoughtful about how you want to spend your time, which sounds like a great way to live life. Is writing something you've always done? Is that like part of your, and that will you continue to do? Is that like built into your weeks?
Yeah. So there's that, when I'm writing a book, I'm typically writing from 5 to 7. And then I'll use that as, because that's usually a pretty creative time that I'll write in. I say that 5 to 7, or really when my youngest wakes up and comes down, and maybe he'll help me write for 5 minutes on the keyboard, but that's about all I'll get with him out. So, and then after that, I have my other things that I'll slot in later. So I'm at least writing 2 hours, trying to write 2 to 3 hours a day in that writing period. When I'm not writing a book, I'll still spend, 30 minutes a day kind of writing some sort of blog article, just curating thoughts.
That's awesome. Billy, I don't know if you're aware, but Billy is a writer as well. He's actually writes, I have it right here. He writes fiction, fantasy as well. Here's one of his books.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so he's no joke. I feel like Billy, what are your habits? What do you do?
Oh, it's scattered all over the place. If I had a normal routine, that'd be ideal. But right now it's writing in the cracks. But if you can get in, even 20 minutes a day, it adds up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that say you gotta have this, like the 5 a.m. routine. It works for me because I'm really ADHD, and so I'm actually fairly disorganized. Even though I have this, listeners are like, "Wait, you're the most organized person I've ever heard of with your system there." But no, I really am, and I'll just get so scattered. But I remember hearing, like, even like I think it's Walter Isaacson who wrote Steve Jobs' book and all those. He would just write in like 15-minute little spurts throughout the day. So everyone's got their own rhythm. So.
Awesome. Well, I definitely recommend Culture System. I went through it this year with during my season. It was super helpful and practical. But let's get into the new book. It's called The Sports Parent Solution. I guess to start, what inspired the idea of writing about sports parents?
The fact that they're probably one of the biggest problems in sports or the biggest challenges, right? And I say that as, and I laugh with it because as I talk about the book, our real problem is that the fact that we think that they are the problem. It's our viewing them as a problem that is creating this problem for us. And it was inspired by, well, really, when I was writing the culture system, I had so much content around parents, the whole framework of the culture system, from our mindset as a leader to how we establish, support, and enforce the culture. And within the framework, there's just big chunks of it where parents, they said, man, this thing's going to be, a massive book like Lord of the Rings size here. So I said, I have to just chunk it over here. And so I just dropped everything into a different outline. I knew I'd write a different book. And had this thing that happened around the time I published the culture system, though. I got this text from this parent, and this parent was one of these parents that loved me and thought I was the greatest coach ever, until there were some hard moments with his son. And I had a moment of discipline where he sat out practice because he showed up late. I mean, he knew the standard. He didn't really have an issue with the consequence, but the dad did. And he tried to run me off the road with his car, So this happens like 7, 8 years ago. And then I published the culture system, and that father had words for me, and he never really apologized for all the things he said to me that day. But the crazy thing was, 7, 8 years later, around the time of publishing the culture system, he sends me a text out of the blue, and I'll give you the short of it. You're the best coach my son ever had. I talk about you all the time to all my friends. This is what he told you. Thank you for the impact you had on my son, but more importantly, thank you for the impact that you had on me as a parent. What he was alluding to, he shared in that text, was that through my example, my leadership, how I was kind and firm in my discipline, that had taught him how to be a better dad for a teenage boy. And I never thought in my life that I was actually having an impact on the parents. I mean, I knew that I was having an impact on kids, and I knew that if I wanted to have a really great impact on the kids, that I needed to work with the parents. But here, I mean, there was a really big light bulb went off for me. It was like, man, not that it's going to happen for every parent, but our own example, how we engage, how we work with them, we can influence parents as well. So I was inspired by that text for sure to start writing right away. So I just got right after it.
Yeah, it's a really cool example, and I mean, extreme example too, to have someone do that to you, and then to come around years later. I feel like that's what you hear examples of that in coaching, like you don't, like, a player will come back years later, thanks coach for that experience, and maybe you don't even remember what you did or the impact you made. But I hadn't taken it to that. I usually think of the players of impact, but that you've done it with coaches as well, with parents as well, is, I think, so helpful to consider for us as coaches. You say in the book that I think it was that coaches are leaving the profession in droves, and that coaches are dealing with parents. What was it? 82% of coaches are dealing with parents, and their careers have gotten worse. Or they've dealt with parents more in their careers because of all this dealing with parents. Why would you say parents are more involved now than ever?
Well, there's been a shift in the culture where there's more money, more investment, like let's look at your sport, volleyball, what parents are paying for their kids to play volleyball today versus what they paid 20 years ago. So, I mean, if I'm paying more money, I'm going to be more involved. So I'm going to feel like I have more of a voice. I'm going to feel more entitled to certain things. Right. So there's a lot of just let's just look at the financial model of sports has shifted. The type of parents that we are seeing today with Generation Z, that parenting style has changed and drastically. And so we're seeing a generation that's a little more fragile than previous generations. So there's that parenting style where we're hovering, where there's the helicopter parent, there's the parents that's trying to, really make things a lot easier. We don't want our kids to struggle, face adversity, get it jumping and stuff. So there's all these, the parenting style has changed, the sporting landscape, what the cost of, a college education has gone up. So now there's parents wanting to try to reap the rewards of an athletic scholarship for their kids. There's also social media. And I mean, we talk about social media and the harm it does for our kids, but I mean, how often do we see parents today that are constantly posting about their kids' athletic achievements? And so we're seeing where I'm sure 20 years ago, as a parent, we tied a lot of our self-worth to the fact that our kid was really, really good, won a state championship or whatever it is, got a college scholarship. But now it's so much more public. Now we get all the congratulations and all that stuff. So you're seeing how social media is impacting parents today. So it's really created, there's all these different factors. I'm sure there's a few others out there that are really making this much more difficult um, for coaches as parents are getting more engaged. And for coaches that have been in the profession for a long time, it's like, whoa, like it used to be just, I said, this is what we're going to do. And we did it, like there wasn't all this pushback. And so it's a big, drastic change for a lot of coaches today.
Yeah, and you mentioned like your experience of your basketball coach when you were a kid was definitely like different than what we'd see today, physically, emotionally, maybe abusive to you guys. You just don't think that happens as much because of the reasons you outlined?
Yeah, definitely some of that. There's definitely much more of a push today too for safe sport, for protection of young people. Absolutely. So there's more awareness to this. And when I was playing high school basketball, it was right around the Bobby Knight era when he got pushed out in 2001, right? So that was a sign of things starting to shift. And what we've seen in the last 20 years, though, is and some of this is good stuff, is the power has somewhat shifted to the athletes today, right? The athlete has choice. They can transfer, they can move schools, they can move clubs, right? So the power has shifted a little bit away from the coach. Some of that's bad stuff, right? We've seen parents and athletes weaponize that against coaches, right? There's a lot of false accusations. They don't play the kid, and all of a sudden, the player's not getting playing time, and then suddenly I've seen parents come at coaches and say, you've ruined their love of the game. You're destroying their mental health. And it's like, whoa. Like, well, all we did here was just not play your kid. So some of that's being weaponized today against coaches, which is concerning. But I think at the end of the day that the shift from what I experienced from that emotionally and sometimes even crossing that lines to physical abuse from a high school coach, right? Like today, athletes can stand up and they can speak up against that type of coaching behavior, which in many ways is a really good thing. We need to be protecting our athletes today from that type of coaching.
Yeah, no, and it is progress when we think back to that. I mean, I grew up playing basketball, and I had not physically abusive, but emotionally abusive coaches, and I don't think anyone ever said anything. That was just thought of as good coaching. I mean, we had Bobby Knight as a role model, right? That's what we saw. So it's great to see the progress that has been made, but it feels like yeah, where's that balance? Like the pendulum maybe has swung too far the other way, where all the power is with the parents, and the coaches have lost some of it. But if I had to pick one of the two, I'd rather be where we are now than where we were then, thinking on my experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is a lot of the way things go. Like there has to be a little bit of correction. The problem though is, we're losing good coaches, and good coaches are having to really, I mean, when you think about the majority of coaches, they're getting our volunteer, or if they're getting paid some crappy stipend where they're making like 10 cents an hour.
Yeah.
And so you have this, the problem is you get this resistance. You get some parents that have this sense of entitlement, you get a couple parents, or one or two parents in a really probably a good bunch of parents, but those one or two parents really can make a coach's life miserable. And the coaches are going like, whoa, I'm barely getting paid money here, right? To do this job. I'm not around my own kids to be with your kids. And I'm doing all this. I can't get even a thank, and I'm not even getting a thank you. I'm getting, abusive texts and emails. And then what we're seeing is, and a lot of administrators just don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to stand up for their coaches. And sometimes that's the financial stuff. Sometimes that's the lawsuit fear of like, we got to investigate every claim and every accusation. We've got to hear every complaint today because today's people want to be heard. And there are a lot of good, well-intentioned responses to some of these parents' complaints, but it is getting a little bit out of control, and I've seen so many good coaches suffering from stuff that they shouldn't have to be.
And that's why we need your book. I think this book's at the right time and a really helpful tool for next steps for people. And that's how you start out. You talk about taking ownership as a coach. So if this is our world that we're living in, like how can you maybe take some more control, some ownership over how to manipulate and set up and have more control over it. You have a great quote from Dave Brandt, the Bucknell soccer coach. If you don't like what's happening on your team, take responsibility. So I definitely, when I think of that, I think, oh yeah, responsibility of my players and my culture. But this book takes it to beyond that. So I guess how would you take ownership of your parents?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, with like, I think in the college level, there's a great thing happening there. Like there's this transfer portal and players are leaving teams, and they're leaving teams either because they don't like the culture that you've created or because you recruited the player that doesn't fit the culture you're trying to create. Right. And they just want to be in a place where it's all about them. Right. So sometimes you're recruiting the wrong player and sometimes you're not doing a good job creating the culture if you got a lot of players transferring. I think when it comes to the parents and the culture you're trying to create around parents, I mean, the funny thing is I've got a lot of people are like, oh, this is a great book for high school coaches. I'm like, almost half the examples are actually college coaches in the book, right?
Yeah.
And high level ones. Anson Dorrance, right? University of North Carolina women's soccer, 21 national championships, right? From a coach at William & Mary Division I lacrosse to an NAIA coach, right? So we have lots of examples of others. When it comes to the ownership of the parent culture, we have to find ways to start to engage them in a way that's going to start to healthily build partnerships rather than just defining roles and putting up walls. I think that's what I'm really trying to drive at.
And how do you recommend responding to parent feedback? In the book, you share an example of maybe what not to do with a coach posting it on the wall, making players run. Can you talk about that and maybe what's an effective way?
Yeah. So when you're getting feedback from parents, one of the most important things is to give yourself the 24-hour rule, right? Like try not to engage in a place where you're going to be really, really emotional and regulated. And I had a coach that a client of mine that had a parent complaint, parent email. Actually, this parent sent the coach a text message, email, and a Facebook message. And maybe left a voicemail on his school number as well too, right? So he sent it all in the one day, right? And blast him. And the coach just responded, "Hey, this is over like Thanksgiving weekend." He says, I'll get back to you on Monday. I'm not going to respond to anything else after this." Right? It creates that boundary and it allows everybody to kind of maybe calm down in that stage there. And so if you can create some space and some time, that's really helpful. The first thing the next thing I'd say is to come and just ask questions and be curious. Take a naive mindset. Put aside your judgments and your assessments. This is a crazy parent. Here we go. Another conversation around playing time. You got to kind of like all these past traumas from these previous coaching conversations with parents. You got to kind of put them off to the side and you got to say, hey, what's going on here? Tell me what's going on. And you got to listen. You got to ask questions to really follow up. And then I always say, summarize that. Okay, so what I'm hearing is this. Okay, thanks for sharing. Can I share my perspective now? That would be the next thing. It's just lean in and say, can I share my perspective? Right? Share your observations and then your assessments. Those are two different things. Observations are facts. They're assertions or truths. Your son, your daughter, they were late. Your son, your daughter did this. This is what we're seeing. Statistically, we're seeing this. Also, our assessment is this, that they're not ready for this level. They're not committed. They're not, whatever it is. And, if there's depending on the conversation, maybe it's around playing time roles, or maybe it's around consequence or some consequences, some discipline type thing. Just say, this is why we decided this. This is why we put them in this, in this position. So just communicating that and then following that up with, hey, now maybe you might change your opinion on something because of the conversation. You probably won't. right? Maybe you do, but the real powerful question is, what can we do to support your child moving forward? Because their role is not going to change, or they're still going to have to serve out this penalty or this consequence, right? So it's just, that's not going to change. But what I can do and what can we do to support them moving forward in that role? So we're trying to just reestablish that partnership.
Yeah, I think I've often gone about it the other way. I think of maybe the analogy. I remember playing in college. I felt like the people who were hurt were the people who always spent lots of time in the training room. Like, I'll never go to the training room. And I think my view is like, oh, the people who interact with the parents a lot, they're the ones having all the parents issues. So you just put up a wall and say, I'll have this separation. But I love the direction. I mean, you're taking it in I think a healthier direction. And kind of like what you were mentioning, you say in chapter 2, be curious, not judgmental. And this idea of learning the names and learning more about the parents instead of just, oh, hey Billy's mom, good to see you, and then go the other way. Yeah, I guess what do you see, like why go this direction, and what are some of the benefits of it?
And if I just look at my own life, every relationship that has any significance or meaning, the when I start to sense that I'm putting a judgment, right? I'm creating and filling in the facts, which is what our brains do, right? So our brains, we don't need to have all the facts to make judgments or assessments, right? And that's how it's the evolution has worked for us, right? And that serves us to protect us in a lot of ways, but it also hurts us. So, but I have a look at my own personal life, right? Every time I go to a judgment, if I can press pause on that and just get curious and ask questions with the person, that conversation goes really well. I'm usually wrong about something. I may not be wrong with the whole thing, but I'm usually wrong, or I'm missing some of the facts. And so the more we can be curious and is the better, especially with a lot of conflict. But even just, I think so often, and I talk about this in my previous book, which is like an hour mindset, which is, if we really want to build effective relationships and partnerships with people, with our teammates, or with our players, with our athletes, with our staff, we have to see the person, as a person. We have to see parents as people in these situations, with needs, objectives, and challenges as legitimate as our own. And so if we can actually be really truly curious and learn their names, learn about them, where do they work, did they play the sport, but also, some details around what their hopes are for their child, what they want that experience to be like, what are their concerns, not just for their sport, but what are their concerns for their child in the next few years of their life, and just try to really be curious about the person, the family, and all that then people feel appreciated. It builds that relationship up. And then if you have challenges down the road, you're in a much better place to be able to effectively deal with those challenges.
I just came across recently, again, I'm sure everyone's seen it, the scene in Ted Lasso where he's throwing darts, and he talks about be curious. Like the guy didn't, I forget who it was, like the owner of the other didn't consider if he was good at darts. And it's a powerful scene, and just a powerful kind of mantra to have in life in all situations. Like, could I be a little bit more curious in this situation? It's something to strive for.
Absolutely.
And in chapter 3, you talk about the big issue of playing time. What suggestions do you have for coaches when addressing playing time with their teams?
It's really interesting. We're actually really bad at this as coaches in general. I'm just going to call out coaches right now on a coaching podcast, and everyone's going to probably be like, yeah, right. No, but like, I mean, we really are not very good at this. If I asked most coaching staffs, I do this oftentimes, I say, I want you to write down very briefly in 3 to 5 bullet points, how do you decide playing time here? I get a very wide range within one coaching staff, okay, of how they determine it. So we had to first off really understand, how do we determine it, and then finding effective ways of communicating that. So I work a lot with coaches on this, but we often might say, hey, there's competitive minutes and there's development minutes, right? We separate these two types of things, so we know how to communicate how we're deciding minutes. Well, there's competitive when the game is at stake, and there's development when we know the game is in hand, right? Or so trying to find good language around that, as well as, trying to have our process clear so that we're actually, well, okay, the coaches have a conversation around it. So just make sure that how you're determining playing time, and how you're then able to communicate that in language that the players can understand. So once you figure out how you determine it, then you've got to communicate that to the players. This is our process. This is how we decide competitive minutes, development minutes. I often talk about simultaneous thresholds, which is this idea and concept in coaching that is, first off, eligible. To be eligible, you have to meet the ABCs. You got to hit academics, behavioral, and cultural standards. If you're doing those things, now it's all about the second threshold, which is about performance. What we often do is we say we value hard work and effort and all these things. And so then players say, well, if I work harder than her, then I'll get to play. It doesn't work like that, right? You're either eligible or ineligible. And most coaches then don't have that distinction around that. And so then because we get this miscommunication to players around who gets to play and who doesn't. So make sure you communicate clearly to the players around that. I really think that simultaneous thresholds is a really key concept, cultural concept that coaches need to understand for as well. And then how are you going to continuously communicate that? So this is really important. Throughout the season, we often do like a Google form check-in, okay, where we say, how many minutes are you expecting to play, or how much of the next game are you expecting to play on average? And we poll all the players. And when we ask them that, we then get the data back quickly, and we can look at the players and say, oh, she really is way off base. She's not going to play that much. And then we can go have that conversation with that athlete. So we'll do that every time there's maybe big lineup shifts or stuff like that. So just processes for continuously communicating throughout the season. One-on-ones every time there's a big lineup change, not right before the game, but we try to give the player 24 hours to reset themselves if they're going to be dropped in a lineup. So kind of principles like that, as well as we also got to know how we're going to appreciate and love our players regardless of their role.
I love the first example. It reminds me, I learned it from a sports psychologist we worked with, and just the way we were brought up, like the school system, if I do my homework, if I study hard, I work hard at it, I practice a lot, I get the A. And it's not the same in sport. It's not the same reward system. Just because you show up to every practice, work the hardest, doesn't mean that you're gonna start every game. Like and doesn't mean you're gonna go win the game either. So it's a different framework than we've been working with through our whole school system compared to the sports system. It doesn't always set us up the right way, which I think that's where it's helpful to have what you talked about, so coaches can communicate that and understand
and
that.
It's on a curve, right? Like we're grading on a curve. Like there's only so many A's we can give, so many B's, so many C's, right?
Right.
And another analogy we often use with parents, we use that with parents, right? To communicate to parents, hey, this is how we decide playing time. Remember, but we're grading on a curve here. There's only so many A's, B's, and C's. Or we do a pizza. We say we have this pizza. This is all the playing time available, right? And the reality is some people aren't going to eat here some days, right. And that's difficult because we talk about being a family here, but in a family, everybody eats. It's not in the team though, right? And that's the reality. The other thing that's really challenging is oftentimes players will move to two things. They'll move up levels, and all of a sudden they go from being the star to not being a starter, right? That's difficult, as well as oftentimes they'll move up the club level. And initially it's, hey, everybody plays, right? It's under 10s or whatever. Oh, wait, now we're competitive. Now you're not playing at all. It's really, really difficult, I think, for parents and the athletes to experience that shift.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? And I guess what would be your philosophy on playing time, moving from youth levels into high school and club? What do you recommend for coaches?
I think it's so contextual. It's everyone's context is different. You just got to make sure that you're communicating right off the bat. Like I'm coaching under 8s Gaelic football here in Ireland. That's where I live, and my daughter plays there. And here it is, like we are working as hard as we can to get your daughter in every position and equal time. And then there's going to be a conversation that we have when they reach under 12s or under 13s, whatever, things get really competitive. And we're like, we're no longer splitting the teams up, because we might have like 40, 50 girls. We might split them up on the game day, even teams. we're splitting them up now based upon talent level, right? Now we're moving, now we're shifting, and this is why. We're still valuing the experience of everyone, but that experience is going to now start to change. And the same with minutes. Right now, minutes are not going to be evenly distributed. And so just being really forward and upfront with people at the beginning, and explain your rationale. And that's going to be difficult, but if we don't get really clear about it up front, then it creates a lot of problems down the line.
That's I'd love to hear more about that. The Gaelic football part. I think you grew up playing basketball in South Carolina. Is that right? You grew up in
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so then how are you coaching a Gaelic football team? How does that, don't you have to have grown up playing it to coach it and have to have all this knowledge about the sport? Like how's that happen?
I mean, I think most coaches would say coaching is coaching, right? Like, I mean, no, I'm coaching the lower levels here, right? So I'm starting to get my knowledge base up. I've been following the sport for some time, and I actually got out and played a little bit in an over 35s league here locally with some of the other dads, which is a lot of fun. It is an amazing experience. Having coached professional basketball and high school basketball at a high level, for 15 plus years, to go and just you're the under eights. They're like, they literally learn and grow so fast. It is just an amazing experience, and it's so cool for me too to be coaching a sport that I know very little about, and I'm like a sponge too, and so I'm learning with them. And but at the same time, the sport is similar enough to basketball that I'm able to take a lot of the drills I use in basketball and I'm able to transfer them over to the Gaelic football, and which is cool because some of these other football coaches, even some of the upper levels, they'll see us doing a drill, like, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's this drill here from basketball." Like, "Oh, that's a great idea," So it's been a lot of fun.
That's what's really cool about having this fresh set of eyes, is there's so many traditions and so many things that are built into sport that you don't question it. You're like, oh yeah, that's what we've always done. But to have you come in having a different perspective, I bet you'll bring so many new concepts and things, and like, oh, why do you do it like that? Why do you do it like this? I feel like we all need that experience.
Yeah, crazy story here. So at the time of this recording, I'm like 2 weeks out from a trip where I'm going to be going to Charlotte, North Carolina, to work with USA Olympic field hockey team. And New Zealand's coming in for some friendly matches, and I'll be doing some observations, cultural meeting with the staff. I've never watched a field hockey game in my life. I'm so excited, right? But there's the value of and I can't recommend that enough, of just getting people from other sports to come in and watch you, other coaches, especially at alternate sports, because if you're running a volleyball practice, you get another volleyball coach, they're going to really kind of look at the volleyball, right? I know very little about volleyball. Like I played it in PE every day in high school, but that's about it, right? So, but if I come in there, I can really start to pick up on some things, even as a coach, like teaching technique, ask questions, because there's a naivety. Just back to the beauty of being curious and naive and a learner. We actually ask questions that are get other people to think really, really well, and reflect on some of the why they do stuff, and they start to discover some blind spots, right?
Yeah. And our sporting world has more and more become the specialist world and lost that idea of the generalist, and there's been, I think, negatives like from physical, like wear and tear, to mental fatigue. But I love this idea of like donor sports. Okay, yeah, Gaelic football, basketball, field hockey, they're all invasion games, and they're helping me understand space and communication and all these other skills I can be developing. So I'd love to see sport go more that direction. I don't think it is because of some of the business models, but I think it'd be great too for coaches to be thinking, can I be a little bit more of a generalist, and like you're saying, be curious and learn from these situations. But all right, I'm taking us off the book a little bit, but that's a really cool topic to hear you going through. So going back to the book, it was in chapter 5. We talked about this a little bit, just talking about communication, and setting up a parent meeting at the beginning of the year with athletes and coaches, and I thought, when I picture those meetings, I'm picturing a coach in front of everybody lecturing for 45 minutes. Here's all our rules, and here's the time you got to show up, and if you don't show up, but you talk about starting with asking instead of telling. Can you take us through why you suggest doing it that way?
Yeah, whether you're running a big parent meeting with 30 parents in your program or your club, or you're running parent athlete coach conferences, I want to ask questions. And there's a lot of questions I give in the book, but it's really around trying to get an idea of what their goals are for their child in that sport. Like, why do they want them to play that sport? What do they see success look like? What do they want their experience to look like? What do they want their experience as a parent, sports parent, to look like? Right. So sport related, but also then to shift down to, what's really important to them in life. What are some of the struggles and challenges that their child has faced? What are some things that they're anticipating moving forward? Who do they hope they grow and become through this experience, their sporting experience? So sometimes the beauty of questions is not only do we learn a lot, right, about what's important to that individual, but the power of these questions is oftentimes that it actually helps others to learn, right? So it's about themselves. It causes them to reflect. And so this is the coolest thing. Like, I have a Division I coach that I work with, and their staff started to take on. I did a workshop with the entire coaching staff on recruitment and how we got to ask better questions in recruitment. And so they started asking these better questions, and the feedback was incredible. These parents were sometimes stumped. They're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I guess I haven't really thought too much of what's most important about her experience, like these types of things. And just some questions you think would be common, or what their biggest challenge will be coming into college, but just this genuine, this questions get them to reflect on what is actually most important. Who do I want my daughter or my son to become going through this program? That's a really powerful question. And that is just as much of an impact on the receiver of that question as it does for you when you listen back to what they're sharing with you. So it shows that genuine curiosity, interest, and it really lays the foundation for a partnership that's going to be critical to supporting that athlete moving forward.
Yeah, and you talk about the book too, not just the question asking, which you give some great examples like you shared there, but also the ability to actively listen. Because I could see like, oh, I just kind of keep going down this list. Next question, next question, next question. Could you take us through like what the active listening step is and why that adds the value?
Yeah, man. I could talk a lot about active listening, because even for me, I've learned some new things in this just even recently. But active listening, I'm fully engaged, and I'm asking follow-up questions, right? My body language is going to articulate, I hear you. I'm going to summarize sometimes back to that individual. Okay, this is what you're telling me here and there. And you got your follow-up questions asking for deeper clarification. But I mean, to really fully active listen, you have to be present with the person and present with yourself. And that's really important. The with yourself part is maybe the thing that I have left out in that. Like, I used to think active listening was being fully engaged on what you're sharing, what John's sharing with me right now. But it's also recognizing what's coming up for me right now in that. Am I distracted by other things outside of my conversation with John? Or did John just say something to me that's now got me thinking something else? And so we have to be aware of ourselves in conversations.
It's making me think, and this is, I think, part of being the podcast, you got to be thinking ahead. So, but it's a skill I want to keep building. But as I'm listening to you, like I'm picturing what your next book is going to be, and after listening, like, okay, I could see him doing something on like active listening, motivational interviewing, or maybe something with this Gaelic football experience, like some sort of generalist learning from these different experiences. But maybe you already know your next book, but that'd be my stab. Am I on
Yeah,
track?
I don't know. I'm taking a time out for now.
Good for you. Yeah, let's be in the present. Let's celebrate this one.
John's going to keep you busy.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep, keep the train rolling. I'm loving all these books, but either one of those with the topic in line with that would be pretty cool to read.
Yeah. In chapter 7, you talk about Anson Dorrance. We think of as just super competitive coach. And it was pretty shocking to hear that he actually allows reserve players a few minutes of playing time when their parents are in town. Why does he do that? And how does he keep parents involved?
Yeah, I always remember something that he said to me a while back, which was, Like, some programs have parents weekend, this one weekend where they bring the parents in. He's like, every weekend here is parents weekend. If a parent's coming to town, we're going to have them be a part of something that we do. And I think it's just, whether it's a team meal, he just constantly wants to bring the parents around the program. And so it's that type of attitude, as well as his ability just to have conversations with parents. He's not afraid. He's got the competitive cauldron that he's notorious for, where they have rankings of players based upon their performance in practice. And parent calls around playing time. He's like, well, let me show you where she's at in the cauldron. So he's not afraid of having those conversations. But I'd say what's probably impresses me the most about Anson is his attitude, his mindset towards parents. As he told me, he says, I recognize that I owe the parents. I've never heard a coach say that in my life. It's always like the parents owe me because I'm giving them all my time. But he's like, I owe the parents because they've helped this player become who she is. They've invested so much time and money and effort in raising her and taking her around. And that's why she's a talented player. You have the player put the work in, but the parents, is in a sport like soccer, there's a big investment of money and all that support. And so he appreciates that. And so he honors that. And even though he does that, he still gets crap from parents too. He's got his crazy stories as well. And you would think, man, this guy's got 21 national championships. How do people buy, how is he getting heat? But he still does too.
Yeah, come on.
He's got to win more, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I love I love that reframe of I owe the parents. And there's a part in the book that really opened my eyes up to that idea. And I guess I knew it, but I didn't consider this. You wrote how, parents are driving or flying hundreds of miles, they're braving the cold, they're cutting up fruit snacks, they're staying in hotels. Like, why not include them? Why am I separating this? Like, I think us having empathy, considering their experiences, and now I've begun to do it, like being on the sideline, you're more a nervous wreck than you are even as a coach watching your kid compete. So to have that empathy and to feel like you do owe them gratitude for their support, for them raising the player you get to coach, it's such a powerful reframe and consideration, because I don't think we do all that as coaches. So I guess more just a thank you with that.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I had a coach, ice hockey coach in Canada. They drove down to North Dakota to play a match there, and they were driving 10 hours. Had the coaching call with him, and I'm working with him, and he's like, man, I got some issues. Some parents, they're coaching their kids too much. They're going against our philosophy. They don't understand what we're trying to do. I said, well, coach, are they going to be at the tournament this weekend all the way to North Dakota? Oh yeah, our parents, they travel so well. They'll drive 10, 12 hours, whatever, no problem. I said, are they staying in the same hotel as you? It's like, yeah. Are you doing film on the Friday night before the game? He's like, yeah. I was like, what if you just invited some of the parents in to watch some of the film session and you kind of walk them through and what you're trying to do? He's like, I never thought of that. And so he does it. And then the parents are like, oh, thank you so much for that opportunity. And, he didn't have them there for the entire meeting, but they appreciated it, and problem was solved, right? They just like, oh, I learned so much from that 30-minute film session. Thanks for all the stuff you do for our boys, So it's just simple things like that, at times where it's just like, they're here. Why not bring them into a film session? Why not share a meal with them? Why not, invite them to some sort of team activity? They don't even have to be doing stuff with the players. They could be doing stuff with the other parents. So.
Yeah. And it's cool to hear that. I can see the value. If I'm playing like devil's advocate, like, well, parents already think they're such experts on everything. And, if I invite them in more, then they're going to want to coach their kid more and coach me more. Are there potential downsides to doing stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think the reality is you if you do things the right way, and I talk about in my book, you got to establish some boundaries, right? And that is that, a lot of my coaches, they actually do an X's and O's or a tactical type of, they do like a clinic. Like sometimes they do it on Zoom, 30 minutes to an hour or whatever. Hey, if you want to learn about how we teach the game and things we do, a lot of these parents that they work with, or that have their kids, they actually are coaches of younger levels. And so to just sit down there and communicate how we do what we do, because we know that some of them are they're going to be in their kids' ears, whether we tell them to not be or not, right? They're going to be coaching their kids, whether we tell them not. So we want them to at least understand what we're trying to coach them. Secondly, so often when coaches do that, parents are like, oh my gosh, this game is way more complicated than I thought. They're blown away by the level of intentionality that coaches have, the amount of thought they put into their system. So I have not had a single issue from this, right? I'll just say that. So
No, that reminds me, because you hear it so much from the stands, and something like volleyball, like just gotta make your serves. Like, yeah, we can get them to make a serve, like, but we're trying to serve tactically to this seam with this speed and this movement. Like, and yeah, if they don't have that understanding, they're just gonna continue to yell from the stands, you gotta make your serves. Like, you don't get it. But if we don't educate, then how are they gonna get it?
see, and if I was a volleyball parent, I would never have known that. I've been just like, the goal is just to get it in play. And that see right there, I would have learned something so much from that. You teaching me that.
Yeah. It's easier just to sit there and go, oh, these parents are idiots, they don't get it, than to actually go and educate and spend the time. And I think you're opening up some blind spots, definitely for me, and hopefully for coaches who are listening, because I think we often just complain instead of proactively look to make some changes that can lead to better relationships for the player parent relationship, and then us with coaches and parents. So yeah, it's awesome.
In chapter 8, you talk about the power of moments. Can you go into that and maybe why those powerful moments are more important now than ever?
Yeah. So we talk, there's some key moments to set the stage of your season where you invite them into a partnership and you invite them to be part of the team. And what we want to do is we want to bring parents closer to the team. So here's the thing. One of the biggest frustrations we have as coaches is they're all about their child. They're not about the team. They don't, and we know this when it comes to playing time and decisions we make, we have to make decisions which are in best interest of the team. They care about decisions that are best interest of their child. And we feel like those things can't coexist. But if we can help them to be a little bit more about the team, we can say, hey, we're still really invested in your child and we're about the team. And there might come a point, at certain moments where you might have to choose the team over the individual. That we get that, but it shouldn't always be that way. But if we got to bring them into that team experience, so powerful moments brings them into the team experience. Some examples of this: we have like a Valentine's dinner, mothers and their sons. We do father-son retreats, father-daughter retreats. We do father-daughter Valentine's dinners, right? I had a coach that brought parents into the locker room after winning the conference championship last year. And they just were flies in the wall. They got to see the team celebrate. They got to come in there and be a part of some of the speeches. And I had a coach bring in the parents after a really hard loss at the end of the season. They got to see those guys get emotional. They got to hear the words of that coach and how proud he was and encouraging. And every moment those parents appreciate that opportunity to just be brought a little bit into that team experience. Spoke just about a film session. So powerful moments oftentimes brings them into the transformational experience that we are offering our players. That's what I talk about a father-son retreat. That's at the collegiate level in the book, right? Greg Tungel does that at Indiana Wesleyan. We've replicated that at high schools and colleges, right? That these retreats and how we run them, we're bringing them into some of this transformational experience. So what happens, the results that we get are this. First off, the parents are more about the team, the relationship, because now the sons, they know the other parents, but they also know the other kids, right? And then they can support them. They're more likely to support them. So they're more bought into the team. Improves your relationship with them. They know your heart more. Secondly, and here's the most powerful thing about this and this whole approach, the feedback has been this. Not only does it improve the player experience, the team experience, and the player buy-in, but it's actually improving the parent and athlete relationship. Mm-hmm. In so many cases, parents and athletes don't have conversations. They don't have connections. They don't talk to their parents, and they're strained, especially as you get older and older. There's those difficult relationships. And what we're seeing is, in moments, I've seen this, and one of the big tough dad, I was giving a workshop for parents in Georgia years ago. Big tough dad, real thick exterior, just didn't think he was getting to him. But we created this experience where the parents are part of the practice, and he came up to me with almost tears in his eyes. He was like, man, I got to get back to just enjoying this sport with my kid, because all it's doing right now is creating division between us. And so this is the most powerful thing about this approach, is it actually becomes healing for families at times.
Yeah, that's a great message, and gosh, so much more valuable than than wins and losses. And that's why sports so awesome, is because you get to have all these experiences that go beyond if I can serve in or hit in or dribble a basketball. Those are great examples. So something else you go through is hard conversations in the book, which I think for coaching is just a helpful tool in so many situations with administrators, with players, but for sure with parents. So you go through some of the principles. One of them, actively listen, which we hit on a little bit, share your perspective, and partner for success. Could you maybe hit on, since we covered active listening a little bit, could you hit on the last two, share your perspective and partner for success?
Yeah, I think Billy had asked about like, how do we handle tough feedback? And I would say it's pretty much the same process here, right? We're going to ask questions, be really curious, and then we're going to share what we're seeing, sharing that as observations, the facts we're seeing, share our assessments, and share that lightly. I think that's maybe something I didn't really mention earlier. When we share something around playing time, when we share something as far as our assessment of their effort or their ability, I like to share it lightly, not as if it is factual. Like you're like, it's just, hey, this is our assessment. We could be wrong, but this is what we're assessing based upon all the facts that we have. And we get it. We have limited, but we probably have a better perspective than the parent. The thing is, oftentimes, even let's say you get a player coming into collegiate level and your assessment could be up to 4 years, right, of their playing career. They're still looking and going, yeah, but I've seen her the last 15 years, right? And so they have all that, their assessments based upon how they've done in other places. So it becomes really challenging for them, and you have these conflicting assessments. So we just share it lightly, right? But, and when we do that, they're a little bit more receptive to it. I think that's a good approach. And then lastly, that partner for success is, hey, what can you do? What can I do? What can we all do to support your son or daughter, your child, into being successful moving forward in the role that she has, in the situation that she's currently in or he's in?
It's cool to think of it like we're teammates and we're working together, where I think other times it's adversarial. I love that. That addition. Like, how can we together help your child?
Well, if you think about it, like there's this parent that comes to this coach, and and the parents are really ticked off about, the playing time. And the parent says, but I've never seen my son so unhappy, and he's depressed, and I'm worried about his mental health. Well, what do you do as a coach? Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to move them up in the lineup because of that. Right? I mean, like, you can't change that, but you have to still support that. Like, how can we help them grow through this experience? Because the real problem here is that their value, their self-worth, their mental health is tied to their performance, to their amount of minutes they're getting in a game. And so you really want to just, without telling the parents that, hey, you kind of messed up here. Like, if this is that damaging for them, right? Instead of saying that, it's like, hey, what can we do so they can grow through this experience? And you're really trying to, like, it's all about, it's a partnership.
Yeah, that's a great message. Okay, so I had just two kind of random questions that I think are a little outside of the book, but related to parenting. When I first started reading the book, I'm not sure why I got inspired, but it was like, I went on YouTube, I was like, parent coach altercations, or parents behaving badly. And all of a sudden videos popped up of parents, just being idiots. And a lot of them had to do with them physically, emotionally, verbally attacking refs. Like they were, being idiotic towards refs. And I've seen it in my own daughter's soccer games I go, people are yelling at refs. And I mean, refs get it pretty rough. So I guess what advice do you have as a coach to help with that relationship? And I'm sure modeling is a big part of it, but what are some things we can be doing to help that dynamic?
Yeah, what I would say is, you just probably said what we can do, which is 90% of it, which is what are we modeling? And I'd love to see in those examples of the crazy sports parent that punches a ref, what was the coach doing? How is the coach handling the situation with the refs. So often the players and the parents respond to the coach's example. So that's one. I've seen our early season meeting. We had a situation where one high school, the coach was really struggling with his parents. And so they brought a referee in to explain, to talk about what he does outside of refereeing, to humanize these. These are people.
Yeah.
Work with administration. We're not going to accept that type of thing. Club directors, club administration, we acted on the road. We're going to ask you to step out of the gym. We actually had a situation with a client of mine, and he had some parents that a parent that was acting ridiculous in one of a scrimmage game. And so they're going to the first game of the season, and he's sweating. And I just said, man, go up to that referee and just say, for the game, please hold my players accountable. If they're talking to you, let me know, or you can tee them up. They know that we don't talk to referees. And so you do what you need to do. And if parents are abusing you, especially this one guy in the stands there wearing the green jumper in the back, like, feel free to just call our administration over and ask him to leave, because we're not going to tolerate that. We're going to nip that right in the bud. And so that coach went up to the referees and just communicated off the bat. Like, that's just not in line with how we want to be. So those are some more other proactive types of things. But I would come back to, if the only way you could communicate to parents was through your example, what would your example be saying?
Yeah.
If the only way you could communicate to parents was your example, what would your example be saying? So make sure your example is spot on.
No, yeah, I think that's right on. I guess the problem, and I bet if we went to those videos of attacks, you would have seen the coach attacking the ref verbally for 30 minutes before that. So you're opening up that window. My wife and I always joked about almost like an SNL skit. If you were the parent of a ref, and you go to a game to sit in the stands, like to go cheer on your kid who's reffing, and just after about 30 seconds, you just, be looking around, like, just feeling so bad for your kid, because you're trying to cheer for them. Hey, good call. That was awesome. And everyone else is just berating and killing them. So yeah, I hope coaches, parents, players, let's be kinder to refs. It's a hard job.
It's brutal. And as bad as parents are, man, it drives me crazy to see coaches constantly complaining about the refs too, as if, I mean, it's just, apparently every ref everywhere is bad. And if that's the case, then let's just stop expecting refs to be good and just.
Exactly. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Okay, so the last one I had, this is also, this is a personal example of, so I've had a podcast here for 8 years and coaching collegiately. I read lots of coaching books, try to study skill acquisition, culture. And now, as my daughter's 10 and played on different teams and getting more serious in club teams, and I'll, here and there see a practice, or I'm on the sideline and, see things from a practice standpoint, like, that could be a lot more efficient. That could be a lot more effective. Or from a feedback, from a communication, have lots of opinions on things that I think I also have some expertise in, potentially. But I've kind of gone more the route of, like, I'm gonna stay in my lane. Like, I'm not gonna, I don't want to be that parent who's getting overly involved. So I guess, what would you recommend for me? Would you continue to do that, like let the coaches coach, or should I speak up more? Should I try to get involved more if I am seeing these things?
Yeah, what I've done in my journey already is, I asked my daughter, I said, hey, they're looking for volunteers. Would you like me to coach? And she said yes. And I said, okay, the day that you don't want me to coach, let me know, and that'll be my last season. And so I got involved, because I, like you, I was like, oh man, this could be a lot better, and the kids could be having a lot better experience, and those types of things. But then I just stepped in and just really tried to stay humble and just try to help, and then ask questions, and just, I thought there'd be more positivity could be injected into this practice. So I just try to be that positive guy, try to learn every kid's names, and just slowly work my way in there, of just trying to, when I was asked to offer opinion, and, offer it very lightly. So, that's one approach, is to get involved. I think the other thing is just to recognize that, you know, our kids need to learn from bad leaders and bad coaches as well. They're going to have bad teachers. Like if,
Mhm.
and here's the thing, like we're so in this, and everyone listening to this podcast is like so into coaching. Like
Mhm.
we really break it down. But like, let's just be real for a second. If we went and observed, which we don't ever get to do, our kids' math class, we really wouldn't probably have an opinion on it. Or
Mhm.
if we did, we really wouldn't be that upset about it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's just a reality. It's just that coaching is near and dear to us, and we want them to love the sport because we love the sport and all these things. We just have to separate ourselves a little bit, not just, okay, stay on my lane, because then I think we just stew. We just got to be like, you know what, like put things back in perspective for us, which is just like, this is just a sport.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big component of it. I get a lot of emails from parents over the years. You know, they're giving out about the coaches, and it's always funny because they'll often say, "Oh, you know, I listened to your podcast or I read your book, and I'd love for you if you were my kid's coach. You know, his coach sucks." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're just saying that because I'm not coaching your kid. If I was coaching your kid and I wasn't playing him, you wouldn't like me either."
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, yeah. And I mean, all these dynamics, all these things, that's why it's awesome that you wrote this book. I think it's an important book for the time we live in. And I think people can gain so much. I mean, we barely touched a lot of they have so many great stories throughout it, so many great principles people can follow and use. And like you said, in all levels, whether you're a youth coach, coaching in college, there's things you can apply. There's definitely things I'm going to take. And like I said, you opened up my eyes to things that I think I was not considering blind to. So I hope people go out and get it. I assume Amazon's the best way to get it.
Amazon, Apple Books, yeah, Amazon, Apple Books, and it'll be on Audible shortly. It's just a little trailing behind there on the ebook and paperback.
Cool. Well, yeah, it's the Sports Parent Solution, and then they can also listen to the Coaching Culture podcast, which you co-host. And if anybody hasn't read the Culture System yet, you are late, and you should go get it and start reading tomorrow.
Thanks,
Well,
John.
thanks again, JP. This is awesome. I mean, to have you on again, it was a real thrill, and thankful to continue to get to learn from you. You definitely made me better as a coach, and I look forward to, I know I'm already putting pressure on you for the next book, but thankful for all you've done for us as coaches. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity and to be able to have an impact on a coach like yourself that's been in this, you know, that does mean a lot. So I appreciate that praise. Thank you.
All right. Awesome.